Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay, here to talk a little bit about um, the life and the career of one Triple H, Paul Levesque, the Game, the Connecticut Blue Blood, the fifth member of the Clique, the COO of the WWE, what have you. Yesterday it was announced that he is now retired from professional wrestling. Um, about a couple months ago, and it's here on this channel in the archives. It was announced that he had, some heart issues, and he went to the hospital for it. And thankfully, he recovered. But he's decided to step away from active activity in the world of professional wrestling, actively being a wrestler. Now, as you guys can see, I'm going to take a sip of my water right now. Not going to spit it out, but Triple H would have spit it out because that's what the game does. We're going to take a look at Triple H's career, talk a little bit about some of his greatest moments. I have had the fortune of watching Triple H's entire career since he debuted in the WWE and before. I was already a wrestling fan when he came onto the scene in 1992. As a matter of fact, it was March 24th, 1992. I didn't see him on the in the Indies, but I did see him when he debuted a year later in 1993 for WCW as Terra Rising. He trained initially. He's from the Northeast. He grew up as a wrestling fan, watching both the NWA and the WWF. He grew up as a huge fan of the Four Horsemen, this right here, and a huge fan of Ric Flair, and also a huge fan, of course, being from the Northeast, probably went to a lot of WWF matches, being from Connecticut. So he starts off in WCW as Terra Rising. Now, he talks in a lot of interviews about how he got this name. When Killer Kowalski, former WWF legend, Killer Kowalski, Killer Walter Kowalski, famous in the Northeast, because remember, Killer Kowalski was one of those talents that appealed to the ethnic heritage of many people in the Northeast. He was Polish American, so he appealed to a lot of Polish Americans at the time. So he trains Triple H. He said to Triple H, come with a nickname. It has to be two names, a last name and a first name. So he says, well, the nickname I came up with for myself is Terrorizing. So Kowalski says, well, that's it. Your name is Terra Rising. Terra first and Rising second. So he wrestles under this name for a while. He even makes his WCW debut in 1993 under this name. But eventually Ric Flair is the booker, and Ric Flair of WCW at this time, 1994, Ric Flair takes a liking to him. He says, he starts to delve into a little bit of um, Triple H's personal, heritage. And Triple H happens to be of French Canadian descent, Quebecois descent, French descent. His name Levesque. He doesn't speak it, but that's where his ancestors come from. So Ric Flair has the brilliant idea. They already have William Regal wrestling there as an English aristocrat, as Lord Stephen Regal. So Ric Flair has the idea that Triple H will be a French aristocrat. Problem is, Triple H, despite being of French descent, doesn't speak French. So he says, "Well, just go out there and do a fake French accent, and then change his name to Jean Paul Levesque." So he does this fake French accent for a while. He wrestles a couple of matches, and they have big plans for him that they're gonna team him and Lord Steven Regal up and put the tag team belts on them and make them tag team champions against Harlem Heat. Well, that doesn't happen because by the end of 1994, I think he only had like one big match, one big program against Alex Wright at Starrcade 1994. And then after that, he's out of there. He's unsatisfied with the direction of the character. He kind of considers the character kind of lame, basically. And they really weren't doing anything with him. And he wanted to be more than just a tag team wrestler. I kind of think this is sad because him and William Regal would have been an awesome combination, together as a tag team. They would have went on to be they were the original Blue Bloods. Later on, after he left in 95, they put Bobby Eaton with Lord Steven Regal as the Earl of Eaton. And Bobby Eaton, who's an American from down south, from Alabama, an Alabama country boy, suddenly discovers that he has English, high aristocratic ancestry, and he becomes the Earl of Eaton. Pretty dumb, but the Blue Bloods did have some amazing matches with the American males and with Harlem Heat. So that would have been a good tag team. And then later on, when they split up, they could have had England versus France. As many people know, England and France, they have a tremendous rivalry in real life. They fought the 100 Years' War against each other. They fought hundreds of years before that. They fought hundreds of years after that. They were competitors in the imperialistic age, gobbling up different sections of Africa and Asia as well. And it was a storyline that writes itself. England versus France. And hell, France even conquered England in 1066 under the Normans, William the Conqueror. So that was a storyline that wrote itself, but unfortunately, Triple H doesn't want to stick around for that, and he goes to the WWF. Bruce Pritchard already spoke to him, before he even signed his first contract with the WWF, that he wanted to have him there. He noticed that he had a lot of talent, and the Click guys, Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, they noticed he had a lot of talent because they're watching him on WCW Saturday night, and they wanted to see him go there to the WWF. So he kind of goes there in 1995, and it was crazy because the gimmick that they put him with is so similar to the gimmick he was already using, minus the French stuff. The gimmick that they have for him is an upper-class, aristocratic American gimmick. Rather than be a French aristocrat, he's a blue-blooded, Connecticut blue blood, aristocratic, waspish character with the name Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Of course, named after Leona Helmsley, the hotel magnate lady. And Vince McMahon says that the inspiration for this character was when he first became rich in the 1980s. Of course, being a country boy from South Carolina, growing up in a trailer park, when he became rich and he moved to Greenwich, Connecticut, which of course is very upper class, very aristocratic, he felt like they were looking down their noses at him, kind of treating him as second-class citizens, kind of treating him as second class, kind of white trash. They were kind of treating him like white trash because not only was he from the South, grew up in a trailer park, but he was involved with professional wrestling, which many of them, I'm sure, perceive it as white trash entertainment anyway. You know what I mean? So Vince wanted to kind of poke fun at these kind of people, so he came up with the character of Hunter Hearst Helmsley, the Connecticut Blue Blood, and he would come out with different girls, and he would come out to classical music, and of course, Triple H has a big nose, so Triple H would come out and he would stick his nose up at the crowd, and he would look at them, in disgust because here they are, these bunch of, low class, working class people, and he's a snob. He's looking down his nose at them. It was really brilliant, playing on a lot of the class sensitivities that many wrestling fans will probably have towards people like Triple H, and people like Triple H will kind of have towards them. So it was better than the French thing because Triple H didn't speak French. He could speak English. He knew how to speak East Coast upper class English. So his promos were a lot better. And the outfit that he wore was kind of something that you would see somebody that plays polo really wearing. It was really brilliant stuff. He debuts in 1995 against Bob Sparkplug Holly. Yeah, I'm telling you guys, you can't really make this stuff up when it comes to wrestling because here a race car driver, a NASCAR driver, is fighting a Connecticut blue blood at the first SummerSlam in 1995. That is classic American classism if I ever saw it. So he starts to really climb up the ranks, and the upper echelon of WWE really like him, and they want to see him go places because he's heavily connected. He's already connected to Killer Kowalski, who has that pedigree in the company. Having worked for them in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, he's already connected. But at that time, when he first comes in, he becomes connected even further by becoming friends with the popular kids backstage, or the top talent backstage, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash. He knows who to get in with, and he becomes, at first he becomes their lackey because he's the new kid, right? And backstage in a professional wrestling organization, it kind of sounds like school. Like when you're new, you have to try to kiss up to the kids that are already popular. So you want to be in that popular crew, that popular clique. So he becomes part of the clique. He's the fifth member of the clique. He starts to travel around with him, and the guys really like him, not only because they respect his talent, they respect his work ethic, they respect him, for what he's able to do on the mic and in the ring. Also, they want to stick around with him because all of them drink, all of them do drugs, different kinds of pills. It's notorious for anybody that's read any kind of wrestling book or seen shoot interviews. They know the clique, especially Shawn Michaels, especially the late Scott Hall, especially Kevin Nash. There's that video of Kevin Nash juggling the 2 bottles of pills on that bus. They were doing all kinds of drugs. And one thing about Triple H, he was dedicated to his workout. He was dedicated to his physical fitness. And other than steroids, he didn't do any kind of drugs. He was completely clean. So they used them kind of as the designated driver. But he didn't care because he was going places with the company. He was in touch with the right people, which will become a hallmark of his career and his life later on. So he's part of the clique and all that. And, they start to do this hand sign. We talked about the hand sign, where it comes from. Turkish Grey Wolves, Germany. X-Pac picked it up. He starts to hang with them, and he starts to climb up the ranks of the WWE. He's working with Henry Godwin. He's working with Duke the Dumpster Trocy at that time. But May 19th, 1996 rolls around. Now, what happens at this event, we went over it in other videos, we talked about it, is the infamous curtain call. Triple H that night has a match with Razor Ramon, and it's Razor Ramon / Scott Hall's last night with the company, same as Kevin Nash, who had a match later that night against Shawn Michaels in a steel cage. I was at that Madison Square Garden show. That was a house show. That was the first sellout that they had done in 2 years because 1995 was, they were completely on their ass. And here they are selling out the home arena of the WWF, Madison Square Garden, and they do what they weren't supposed to do. They broke kayfabe. Triple H, a bad guy, comes out and he hugs Razor Ramon, who's a good guy. Same thing, Shawn Michaels. He hugs Shawn Michaels, who's a good guy, and Diesel hugs, two good guys hugging two bad guys. That was a no-no in wrestling because of kayfabe. They wanted to say goodbye to their friends that were going to WCW, but they got in trouble later on in the back. Now, Vince McMahon is in a tricky predicament because who does he punish? He can't punish Shawn Michaels. He's the champion. He can't punish Kevin Nash and Scott Hall because they'll leave it to another company. Triple H bears the brunt of Vince's punishment and the push that he was getting up the ladder. He was supposed to win the King of the Ring that year in '96 and go on to face Shawn Michaels at SummerSlam for the championship. The push that he's getting is now derailed. And Vince McMahon has a conversation with him. He says, well, sorry, Hunter, you're going to have to learn to eat shit and like the taste of it. In other words, you're going to learn to have to take this punishment, with dignity. I'm going to have to derail you. I'm going to have to take away your push. When you were supposed to win the King of the Ring, now I got to pencil in Stone Cold Steve Austin to win the King of the Ring. In hindsight, it was the best thing that WWE ever did because when Stone Cold Steve Austin won the King of the Ring from Jake Roberts that night, that was when he made that promo where Austin 316 says, I just whooped your ass. And of course, that became a movement in the Attitude Era. So Triple H doesn't win the King of the Ring. And for the whole of 96, he goes on to, lose to Duke the Numster Trophy, lose to Ahmed Johnson. He's putting over everybody until the end of 1996 when he finally gets involved with one of the major storylines. Mr. Perfect is coming out of retirement. Mr. Perfect had been an announcer. And now Mr. Perfect is coming back into the wrestling ring, and he's supposedly training Mark Merrow to be the Intercontinental Champion. It was during this time as well, sidebar, that Triple H has his first WrestleMania match against the Ultimate Warrior, who was returning. And anybody that saw how he lost to the Ultimate Warrior remembers how the Ultimate Warrior just squashed him in mere minutes. That was a squash match on TV. So he's losing to everybody. Then Mr. Perfect is coming back. Like I said, Mr. Perfect is all throughout this time talking shit about Triple H, talking shit about the girls that Triple H brings to the ring, saying that he could beat Triple H, saying that his protege, Mark Merrow, could defeat Triple H. So Mark Merrow wins the vacated Intercontinental Championship. The Intercontinental Championship had been vacated after Ahmed Johnson was injured legitimately by Farouk when Farouk debuted. And Ahmed Johnson, had this kidney problem, and then he had to give up the Intercontinental Championship, so it was put up in the tournament, and Mark Merrow defeats Farouk in the finals. And then Triple H is now challenging Mr. Perfect's protege, Mark Merrow. And long story short, it's a swerve. Mr. Perfect turns on Mark Merrow and sides with Triple H. And supposedly Mr. Perfect is going to be Triple H's new manager because he had Sable as a manager at WrestleMania 12. She came out with him, but he was berating Sable and then, yelling at Sable because he lost the match And then that's when Mark Merrill debuted in an interview with Todd Pettingill. And then Mark Merrill, comes to Sable's aid. And now Mark Merrill is with Sable and Triple H is with nobody. But now that Mr. Perfect has turned, is back on Mark Merrill as his trainer. Now Mr. Perfect was supposed to be with Triple H. That doesn't happen because Mr. Perfect leaves the WWF and will turn up in WCW a little while later. Well, he's starting to feud with Goldust, right? Goldust is starting to turn face after the sit-down interview that he had with Jim Ross. We're starting to get to know a little bit more about Goldust's life growing up as Dusty Rhodes' son. And he is starting to feud with Triple H. And they have a match for the Intercontinental Championship at the Royal Rumble in 1997, in which Mr. Hughes, people remember Mr. Hughes as this huge, 400-pound dude that every time he would wrestle, he would be in the midst of a wrestling match and his shades would never even come off. He did a thing with The Undertaker way back in 93 where he stole The Undertaker's urn. But anyway, now he's back as Triple H's bodyguard. Well, that only lasts one pay-per-view because they are starting to put Triple H with somebody else that trained in Killer Kowalski's wrestling school, this phenom of a woman, the ninth wonder of the world, Chyna. She starts to come out and she starts to attack Goldust's manager, Marlena. There's one incident where where Chyna just grabs Marlena and she's ragdolling her around. She's throwing her around like a ragdoll. She's injuring Marlena's ribs. And at first, I ain't gonna front, Chyna kind of looked like a man. And Chyna is Triple H's bodyguard. So Triple H, he is this aristocratic, soft, feminine-like blue blood. And he has this Amazon that they call the ninth wonder of the world because Andre the Giant was the eighth wonder of the world, right, in WWF lore. So she starts to come out after the Royal Rumble. She comes out at that famous Raw in Germany where Triple H and Goldust have another match. She helps Triple H defeat Goldust defeat Goldust to retain the Intercontinental Championship. And she becomes his bodyguard in place of Mr. Hughes. So you got Triple H and you got Chyna. Pretty soon, Triple H on the Raw Thursday edition of Monday Night Raw is one of those editions of Monday Night Raw that was preempted because they were playing other stuff on the USA Network. He has a match with the young Rocky Maivia, who were going to be The Rock. That's when The Rock defeats him for the Intercontinental Championship. And that's really when the fans start to turn on The Rock. Because at first, they kind of liked The Rock, coming out at the Survivor Series in 1996, debuting, winning his Survivor Series match, which Triple H was a part of himself. And that's really where the feud between The Rock and Triple H, which will become famous in later years, really starts. And that's also when fans start to turn on The Rock with the die, Rocky, die chants. And Rocky sucks, which would eventually lead The Rock to become a part of the Nation of Domination and eventually to turn heel and stop being Rocky Maivia and transition from that to The Rock. So with Triple H now he's really, at this time, he's, lost the Intercontinental Championship. That push is kind of floundering. But around 1997, especially June, he finally does win the King of the Ring. He starts to have a feud with Mankind. Mankind, much like Goldust, he has a sit-down interview with Jim Ross, and fans learn about his history in WCW, and they start to gain a lot of sympathy for him. And it was during this time that, with the help of Chyna, Triple H defeats him for the King of the Ring. So Triple H is your King of the Ring in 1997. And he has, Canadian Stampede. He has another match with Mick. And then finally, their feud finally ends, kind of, at the first pay-per-view live event that the WWE is allowed to have in New Jersey at the Continental Airlines Arena, in a cage match where Mankind imitates his hero, Jimmy Superfly Snuka. He goes to the top of the cage, he drops an elbow on Triple H, and that's where their feud kind of ends. I say kind of because they then have a match on Raw, a tag team match. Mankind teaming with his former nemesis, The Undertaker, to take on Triple H and Shawn Michaels. This is the first time that Triple H, and this was October of 1997, this is the first time that Triple H and Shawn Michaels worked together on screen. Other than that incident at May 19th, the curtain call, fans didn't really know, a lot of fans didn't really know that they were friends in real life. That they were the last two remaining part of the clique. Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, part of the clique, and X-Pac, known as the 1-2-3 Kid in WWF, 6 in WCW, left to go to WCW, but those two stayed behind. Well, this is the first time ever on this edition of Raw that there are a tag team, and it was on this edition that Shawn Michaels bloodies Undertaker with a chair shot. You see on the blood coming out of Undertaker's forehead and stuff. And they destroy the Undertaker and Mankind. And Rick Rude comes out. And it was on this edition of Raw that they formed what would later become to be called D-Generation X. D-Generation X is Rick Rude, Chyna, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels. Now, how did they earn this name, D-Generation X? Well, it was from the feud with Bret Hart. Keep in mind, Shawn Michaels had won the Hell in a Cell match to become the number one contender at Bad Blood with help from Kane, who debuted against his brother, The Undertaker. And now Shawn Michaels is finally going to go against Bret Hart in a rematch from WrestleMania 12. And Bret Hart is fond of calling Americans all kinds of names. He said that America has no family values. He's a real moralist. Basically, when it comes to him attacking Americans, he's done it to Shawn Michaels for almost a year and a half. He's done it to Stone Cold Steve Austin. This is what him and the Hart Foundation, his faction, does. They berate Americans, and that's why they're popular in Canada, popular in the UK, but they're not so popular in the US. And the Americans are popular. And the American wrestlers like Shawn Michaels, like the Legion of Doom, like Ken Shamrock, like Goldust, like Mankind, they're popular in the US. So the people who are baby faces in Canada and the UK and internationally are heels in the US, and the people who are heels in the US are baby faces other places. So Bret Hart is a heel in other countries, but he's a babyface in other countries, but he's a heel here in the U.S. It's a U.S. versus Canada storyline. But Shawn Michaels is also a heel. Shawn Michaels turned heel. He cost The Undertaker the WWF Championship at SummerSlam. He hit him with a chair. So when Bret Hart is saying that Shawn Michaels and Triple H are nothing but a bunch of degenerates, they're like, you know what? We are that. We are D-Generation X. And it stuck because they're Gen Xers, and now he's saying that they're a bunch of degenerates. So they kind of mock him for it. They take the piss out of it, if you will, of him calling them degenerates. Even to the point where they're feuding with the Nation of Domination, and they show this incident where they paint all kinds of racial slurs on the Nation of Domination's, locker room. And Shawn Michaels says, when Bret Hart was painting that, he looked over at Jim the Anvil Neidhart or other members of the Hart Foundation, and he said the N-word. And of course, the Nation of Domination is so upset about this that they go down to beat the Hart Foundation. So here you have three factions You have D-Generation X, a heel faction, Nation of Domination, a heel faction, and the Hart Foundation, a heel faction, all three feuding with each other. It was a really crazy time in 1997. But this is a move away from Triple H's heel persona. I mean, his blue blood persona. Now he's moving to becoming more like himself. And rather than using the name Hunter Hearst Helmsley, he starts to shorten it to Triple H. So this is when he officially becomes Triple H. And him and Shawn Michaels, man, they do everything possible. Some of the stuff that they do, they mock what's going on in politics with Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton, where Shawn Michaels says, I did not sleep with that young intern. As a matter of fact, I was up all night. It's just funny, classic stuff. DX is, they're mooning people. They're telling people to suck it. I got two words for you. It's incredible, really funny stuff. The original DX, and they're mocking the WWF commissioner, Sergeant Slaughter. At the time, Triple H has a boot camp match with him in December of 97. They even, Shawn Michaels wins the Intercontinental Championship at the UK only pay-per-view One Night Stand against British Bulldog. And, and then he becomes the WWF Championship as a result of the Montreal Screwjob in 97, which, getting to that was actually Triple H. Triple H was one of the masterminds behind that. Triple H, being a student of the game, being later on called the game, he's one of the people that tells Vince McMahon, listen, if Bret Hart doesn't want to give up the WWF Championship, he doesn't want to lose to Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series, just put him in the sharpshooter. And reverse the decision. Tell Earl Hebner, the referee at the time, to ring the bell. And that's what Vince McMahon does. Shawn Michaels has Bret Hart in the sharpshooter. Vince McMahon on the outside, ring the fucking bell. So, and we all know that. That, to wrestling fans, that is our equivalent of the Kennedy assassination. That's something that's going to be talked about for the next 500, 600 years in the professional wrestling community. I'm sure if you're a wrestling fan, I don't have to go over what is the Montreal Screwjob to you. You already know, just like with the curtain call. But Triple H is infamous, and he's behind that. So now Shawn Michaels is the WWF championship. He's WWF champion, and he's the European champion. So Sergeant Slaughter says, well, you can't be both champions. You got to defend that European championship. So he defends it against Triple H. He lays down for Triple H. Now Triple H is the European champion. And that was the Christmas episode. That was when Triple H and Shawn Michaels said, Merry Christmas! And then they pulled out their pants and they started mooning everybody. It was a time that WWF was switching to more adult programming. We were growing up, as fans that had watched it during the Hulkamania era. And now we were seeing something completely different, a different side to the WWF, this degenerate side to the WWF. So many kids back in the 90s got in trouble, I bet you, for saying suck it. I got two words for you. They all probably went to the principal's office for that. But DX was on fire. They had their own pay-per-view December of 97, kind of like the NWO had it in WCW. They were on fire. Then, moving on to 1998, at that December pay-per-view, Shawn Michaels wrestles Ken Shamrock. And at the end of that, Owen Hart comes back. Owen Hart now is the only Hart family member, the only Hart Foundation member, and the only Hart family member that still stays with the WWF. All the other Hart Foundation members, British Bulldog, Bret Hart, and Jim the Anvil Neidhart, they go to WCW. In fact, Jim the Anvil Neidhart he actually joins DX at one point. There was an episode of Raw where Triple H and Shawn Michaels fooled him, said that he was now a member of DX. They put his hand up, and then China gets him in the balls, and he's unceremoniously kicked out of the WWF after that. And this is the last time we actually see him in the WWF ever. But all of them go to WCW except for except for Owen Hart. At the end of the Ken Shamrock Shawn Michaels match, Owen Hart comes from outside of the audience and he attacks Shawn Michaels. Now people start thinking, okay, he's gonna be the one to feud with Shawn Michaels now for the WWF Championship. Well, for some reason, he's the lone heart. He's the sole survivor. They're calling him. For some reason, he doesn't get that feud with Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels complains, and Shawn Michaels starts continuing the feud with Undertaker, and the guy who gets the feud is Triple H, and Triple H wrestles him at WrestleMania 14 in Boston. There's a stipulation where Sergeant Slaughter has to be handcuffed to China, two of the people with two of the biggest chins in the history of professional wrestling, Sergeant Slaughter and and China. So anyway, Triple H retains the European Championship against Owen Hart, and Owen Hart's push is then derailed. But what happens the night after WrestleMania 14? Well, at the Royal Rumble in 1997, Mike Tyson decided to join the WWF. Mike Tyson, coming off his suspension from biting Evander Holyfield's ear the prior year in 1997, he's suspended from boxing. So nobody really wants to work with Mike until Vince McMahon calls him. Well, originally WCW calls him, but Vince McMahon calls him a second time, and he offers him a buttload of money because he's not going to let what happened to Dennis Rodman happen with Mike Tyson. They initially offered Dennis Rodman something in '96. He didn't take it. Instead, the WCW offered him, and Dennis Rodman ended up becoming a part of the NWO, the first celebrity to join ever a heel faction. So Vince McMahon is not going to let Mike Tyson slip through his fingers, because keep in mind, he's losing the Monday Night Wars against Nitro and Eric Bischoff. So Mike Tyson makes his debut the next night on Raw after the Royal Rumble 1998. And him and Stone Cold Steve Austin have that confrontation where Stone Cold Steve Austin tells him, "You got your eyes locked on the eyes of the world's toughest son of a bitch." And he pushes Mike Tyson. And you hear Jim Ross say, Austin and Tyson. So people are thinking Stone Cold Steve Austin going to take on Mike Tyson at WrestleMania 14. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen because the Nevada State Athletic Commission nixed that possibility. And they say that Mike Tyson cannot wrestle. So they got the idea that finally they'll pass the torch to Stone Cold Steve Austin and put the WWF Championship on him, taking on Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 14. That's exactly what happens. But in between that time, Shawn Michaels has another confrontation with Mike Tyson where he calls Mike Tyson boy. There's a lot of racial overtones with that. Shawn Michaels, of course, being from Texas, and Mike Tyson being African American, him calling him boy, there's a lot of racial overtones with that. And Mike Tyson has the WWF Attitude Era shirt on, the scratch logo shirt. Shawn Michaels rips the shirt, and underneath, Mike Tyson has a DX shirt, and Mike Tyson starts telling people to suck it. And Mike Tyson is a member of DX. Now, after Tyson turns on Shawn Michaels and he counts Shawn Michaels out as a special guest enforcer at WrestleMania 14, Stone Cold Steve Austin wins his first WWF Championship. The night after, you just see Triple H and China come out. And Triple H has told Shawn Michaels, he said, listen, you dropped the ball. I asked you over and over, is he with us? Is he locked down? Is he a part of us? And, you told me no. but Shawn Michaels, you dropped the ball. So basically, he kicks Shawn Michaels out of DX. And he says, I'm starting an army. And when you look to an army, you look to your friends, you look to your blood, you look to the clique. And he points to the entrance, and out comes, formerly the 1-2-3 Kid, but now he's X-Pac. He points to X-Pac, and X-Pac is the new member of the Generation X. And X-Pac delivers a scathing promo against Eric Bischoff and against Hulk Hogan, and because Hulk Hogan on previous week on WCW TV on Thunder, he told Kevin Nash that the reason why his buddy Six Pac was kicked out of the NWO because he couldn't cut the mustard, brother. So he basically embarrassed Sean Waltman, aka X-Pac. But whatever, X-Pac says in the promo, he says, Eric Bischoff, your nose is so far up Hulk Hogan's ass that you could tell what he had for breakfast. It was a hell of a promo. And Triple H then says, you've been an indentured servant for 2 years. Talk to him, kid. Great stuff. But later on that night, something that was unofficial becomes official that night. Later on, Cactus Jack and Terry Funk as Chainsaw Charlie have a cage match, a rematch from that night's WrestleMania where they had a dumpster match against the New Age Outlaws, Road Dogg Jesse James and Badass Billy Gunn. And DX interferes. They leave Mick Foley laying, or Cactus Jack laying there, and Terry Funk as Chainsaw Charlie laying there, and they become a part of DX. The reason why I said it was unofficial, because at No Way Out, February of 1998, they had this 8-man tag match where DX and the New Age Outlaws kind of teamed up, and also DX and the New Age Outlaws also teamed up to beat up the Road Warriors and cut off Hawk's mohawk on an episode of Monday Night Raw. And for some reason, Shawn Michaels, of course, had injured himself in the casket match on the Royal Rumble, and he was in a bad way, and he wanted to save himself for WrestleMania so he could put over Stone Cold, so he doesn't compete in that 8-man tag, and Savio Vega of Los Boricuas takes his place. So Savio Vega, weirdly enough, was a part of DX for one night, right? But what was unofficial, the tag team of the New Age Outlaws and DX, becomes official the night after WrestleMania, and they become a part of DX. So now the new DX is Billy Gunn, Road Dogg, X-Pac, Chyna, and Triple H. And this version of DX becomes so popular that they become baby faces. Triple H starts doing this thing where he's imitating Michael Buffer. Michael Buffer, both in boxing pay-per-views in the 90s and in wrestling pay-per-views for WCW, would do this thing where he would be like, for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world, let's get ready to rumble. So Triple H, being that they were going against WCW, they were cutting ass on WCW, Triple H would do the thing where he'd be like, for the millions in attendance, for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world, let's get ready to suck it. And, fans would they go crazy for that, just like they would go crazy for Road Dogg's catchphrase, oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody. And DX becomes the new DX. This version of DX becomes even more popular than the original DX that has Shawn Michaels in it. So popular that the WWF has the idea that they will lead a DX invasion of the Monday Night Nitro. So DX shows up in army tanks, army fatigues, calling out WCW. They show up at the CNN Center. They show up outside a Nitro where they interviewed this fan, and the fan says he got free tickets. It was a comp and everything. So he says, well, tell us about WCW. And the guy goes, well, WCW sucks. And they start, really putting down WCW. So much so that it gets under the skin of Eric Bischoff, that Eric Bischoff actually challenges Vince McMahon to a match at Slamboree 1998 in the upcoming pay-per-view. But it was really legendary because you never really saw the WWF mention really WCW in any kind of way other than the billionaire Ted skits. Now in 1998, because of Stone Cold Steve Austin, because of The Rock, who had taken control of the Nation of Domination from Farouk the night after WrestleMania, after defeating Ken Shamrock. Because of DX, WWF starts to take the lead against WCW in the ratings war to such an extent. And DX is on fire. They put out this tape of the best of DX, and DX would go around the Times Square, and they had so many fans, man. There was one episode of Monday Night Raw where they had this girl pull up her breast, pull up her blouse and show her breast and stuff. Triple H was, on fire. 1998 rolls around, him and The Rock have a match now. The Rock, he's the leader of Nation of Domination. Triple H, the leader of D-Generation X. The same night, they took control of their respective factions, and now those two factions have beef to the point where DX takes a page out of the NWO's book. The NWO had done a parody of the Four Horsemen, where X-Pac played Ric Flair and Kevin Nash played Arn Anderson. Kept in my spot, not a dog spot, not a liver spot, not just any spot, but my spot. They were parodying when Kurt Hennig joined the Four Horsemen, which he would eventually turn on them at Full Brawl 97. Well, DX takes a page out of that book in 1998 where they do a parody of the Nation of Domination. Road Dogg plays Kama. X-Pac plays Mark Henry Mizark, where they reference that the Clique had put shit inside of Mark Henry's sandwich. So he says, you smell what the Rock is cooking? I don't know what it is, but I'll eat it. Something to that effect, and they parody the Nation of Domination. And Triple H is like, you smell what I'm cooking? You smell what I'm cooking, Mizark? So basically, they're revealing that Mark Henry, when he was first being hazed in the WWF, when he first came in the WWF in 1996, ate shit. Now, this segment, although it wasn't as funny, I feel like, being NWO, being partial to the NWO, I feel like it wasn't as funny as the NWO version, and also this version was taken off Peacock in the WWE Network because X-Pac on this version, when he's parodying Mark Henry as Mizark, he has himself painted black. And of course, that wasn't even acceptable even back then when they did it in 1998. And it definitely in this high racial tension, climate, high socio-political climate that we find ourselves in right now with a lot of political sensibilities, it wouldn't be acceptable even now. But a lot of stuff, keep in mind, that wrestling had done, especially in this era, wasn't wrestling really wasn't ever, even before this era, even when Roddy Piper did it at WrestleMania 6 against Bad News Brown. Wrestling was never really subject to the same kind of political scrutiny as other forms of entertainment, because people did, oh, it's just wrestling, you know what I mean? Like, it was considered trash TV, you know. They wouldn't really look at it that way. You know what I mean? So, but it was taken off Peacock, and of course, it's not acceptable. It's never acceptable to do blackface. They could have did the Mark Henry character, you know, X-Pac portraying Mark Henry in a different way. They didn't have to do the blackface thing, you know, but they did, and some people like it. But didn't like it really. I thought it wasn't really that funny, and even at the time, I thought it was low class. You know, it appeals to the lowest common denominator, racism. A white guy, X-Pac, pretending to be a black guy, Mark Henry, and not only pretending to be, but painting himself black. He didn't have to do that. That was a step too far, but that was the time that it was, man. You know what I mean? The Attitude Era, they didn't really care. You know? So, but what it led up to was one of the best ladder matches ever between The Rock and Triple H. Now, again, Triple H was the guy that The Rock beat for his first Intercontinental Championship on that Thursday Raw Thursday back in '97. So again, Triple H and The Rock now find themselves facing each other as opponents again, leaders of their respective factions, their respective groups. Rock, Nation of Domination, Triple H, DX. They are no longer those guys. He's not the Connecticut blue blood, and The Rock is not some blue chipper guy smiling, kissing babies, and trading on his father and grandfather's name. They're two superstars in their own right, and they're having this ladder match. And this was Madison Square Garden, 1998. The main event was Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Undertaker, and this was on the undercard. Now, what I loved about this match personally was I wasn't there. It was Madison Square Garden. I wish I could have went, but I couldn't get tickets in time enough because, I was in camp that summer, so I wasn't there. But I was watching it on pay-per-view, and my sound cut out, so I couldn't hear Jerry the King Lawler and King's commentary. Never heard it, but I just watched just the pure match. And what you were seeing with this match was a lot of psychology, a lot of in-ring storytelling, and probably was the best ladder match ever. And it was at this moment, they say, that Vince McMahon finally realized that Triple H could be a world champion. Triple H could be the star of the WWE. So, anyway, he defeats The Rock, and both he and The Rock are better for it. The Rock later goes on a couple months later to become the WWE champion. He leaves the Nation of Domination, and he really becomes a superstar in his own right. And Triple H, as well, begins to try to see if he can move beyond DX. By the time WrestleMania 15 rolls around, China has turned her back on Triple H, and she has gone heel. She's joined Vince McMahon's corporation. The group that Vince McMahon has put together are the superstars that are going to destroy the baby faces. And the DX are still baby faces, and they help Mankind defeat The Rock at that January 1999 episode of Raw, where for the first time in 83 weeks, WWF beats WCW in the ratings. WCW drops the ball, of course, by having Tony Schiavone say that putting it on Cactus Jack will put a lot of asses in seats. Well, it does put a lot of asses in seats, and it beats what they have to offer, which is a fake match, a fake match between Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash, Finger Poke of Doom. Kind of similar to what Shawn Michaels and Triple H did on that Christmas episode of Monday Night Raw, but that wasn't the main event, though. That was a phony match, but that wasn't the main event. So when you hype a main event up like that and for your world championship, that was a step too far, and that's when WCW starts to really lose in the ratings and never gains it back. even though the two factions of the NWO reunited, Wolfpack and NWO Black and White, still it's too far gone. Mick Foley wins that night, his first championship ever with the help of DX. But later on, China turns her back on Triple H, and it is China and Triple H now split up until WrestleMania, when we find out that not only is China in the corporation now, Triple H himself is in the corporation. A year after X-Pac's return to the WWE and initiation in the DX, he in the match with Shane McMahon and X-Pac, he helped Shane McMahon win the European Championship, and he himself, joins the corporation and he becomes a heel. Now, I don't know how wise this was. DX was a faction that was on fire, and they had done some really funny stuff, love it or hate it. They've done some funny stuff with, the Nation of Domination. Triple H done some funny stuff with, DX, the WCW invasion and everything. I don't know how, in hindsight, was it really smart to, split up DX this soon. It was only a year. But anyway, they split up DX, and then Triple H joins the corporation, and he and The Rock start teaming up. In fact, he and The Rock have one, I think the first match ever on SmackDown is like, it's a tag team match, Undertaker and Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock and Triple H in the corporation. He becomes a corporate guy, together with Vince McMahon. And he gets to be a real heel. And it is at this time, going into 1999, that he develops the name The Game, because he starts to tell his real story, what really happened in 1996 after the curtain call, how they buried him, how they told him he shouldn't like the taste of it, how he was punished and everything. And he has this interview with Jim Ross leading up to SummerSlam 1999. Now, SummerSlam 1999 is really convoluted. They changed the championship a bunch of times. It's because Stone Cold Steve Austin doesn't want to put him over directly, so they put it to Mankind, and Mankind is the one who who loses to him at SummerSlam 2 years after 2 years after they had their cage match at SummerSlam 97. Mankind takes the fall, and Mankind is the one that loses to him. Jesse Ventura comes back to the WWE. He's the governor of Minnesota at this point, 1999, and Triple H becomes The Game. Now, from this point on, as The Game, he is just taking off. Year 2000 is his year. He has tremendous matches with Stone Cold Steve Austin, tremendous matches with The Rock. He goes into WrestleMania in a four-way against Big Show, The Rock, Mick Foley as himself, and it is a McMahon in each corner, because what eventually happens is they have this storyline where Test, who is part of the corporation, and then leaves them to join the Union, a breakaway group from the corporation that has Ken Shamrock, Mankind, The Big Show, and stuff. He starts to date Stephanie McMahon, and of course Shane McMahon, being our brother, he has a problem with it. Him and Test have a match, and that's when we first time ever we see Shane O'Mac as a wrestler. A tremendous match between himself and Test. Now, when Test and Stephanie McMahon are about to get married, Triple H drugs Stephanie McMahon, and they get married in Las Vegas. And they actually show Triple H pulling into the Las Vegas lot, with Stephanie McMahon all sedated and everything. And instead of her getting married to Test, now she gets married to Triple H. So now Vince McMahon has to come out of retirement. Vince McMahon is now a baby face. He has to come out of retirement and wrestle Triple H and Armageddon. But what eventually happens is that Stephanie McMahon, she falls in love with her supposed husband, Triple H, on screen, kayfabe, and she starts to go against her father and her brother. So, swing around the WrestleMania 2000 time, we have a fatal four-way match between, you have Stephanie McMahon in the corner of Triple H, you have uh, Shane McMahon in the corner in the corner of the Big Show, you have Vince McMahon in the corner of The Rock, who's the winner of the Royal Rumble at that time, and you have Linda McMahon, Linda McMahon bringing back Mankind, who Triple H had retired as Cactus Jack in a Hell in a Cell match that prior month at the Royal Rumble. So he's no longer Cactus Jack now. He's no longer Mankind. He's no longer Dude Love. He's himself, Mick Foley. He's completely out of shape. He looks terrible. But that was a fatal four-way match. It was an elimination and it got down to The Rock and Triple H. Should have just been The Rock and Triple H to begin with. You know what I mean? But whatever. And The Rock and Triple H never actually have a WrestleMania match together. They had that, but that was an elimination. And then Triple H, of course, wins that match and he makes history. That was Anaheim, California. That was the one where they were supposed to use California Love as the theme song, but Tupac's mother wouldn't allow it, so Jim Johnston created his own remix version of California Love. That was the theme song to WrestleMania 2000, aka WrestleMania 16. Now, Triple H makes history because he becomes the first heel to ever walk out of WrestleMania as the champion. Usually at WrestleMania, the babyface walks out as the champion and the heel, takes the loss. Now, Yokozuna had defeated Bret Hart at WrestleMania 9, but as you recall, we talked about this 993 review video on the channel. He didn't walk out of WrestleMania as the champion. Hulk Hogan defeated him. So Triple H makes history being the first heel to ever walk out of WrestleMania as the champion. And not only that, Shane McMahon turns on the Big Show and Vince McMahon turns on The Rock. And now you have the McMahon-Helmsley era beginning. All the McMahons now are on an alliance with Triple H. In 2000 becomes Triple H's year. He sets the world on fire in 2000. Feuds with Mankind, feuds with The Rock, feuds with the Big Show. It's really crazy what he's doing in 2000 and 2001, and that's the year that WWE finally, becomes a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ, on the stock market, and it sets its way to become the biggest corporation that it's set to become because of this time frame in 2000. He also has Rikishi running over Stone Cold Steve Austin, eliminating Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold Steve Austin, of course, had to go for surgery at this time, so he had to be taken off TV. And Rikishi runs him over with a car. This is Survivor Series 1999. Backtracking a little, Rikishi runs him over with a car, and then Rikishi does this whole racial thing where he says, well, they always had Samoans in the WWE, but they never had a Samoan champion. A Samoan be the guy like the Bruno Sammartinos or the Hulk Hogan or the Stone Cold Steve Austin. They always had these white boys. So he says, I did it for The Rock. Everybody always parodies that. They always bring that up. But then later it was revealed that Triple H, they backtracked and they said, oh, well, Triple H just paid him because he wanted Stone Cold Steve Austin eliminated. You know what I mean? So Stone Cold Steve Austin not at WrestleMania that year, and The Undertaker not at WrestleMania that year either. But WrestleMania 2000 is a successful pay-per-view because of Triple H, and WWE is on fire. 2000 might be the best year they ever had. You know what I mean? They are now a publicly traded company. 2001, Stone Cold Steve Austin is back. He wins the Royal Rumble. He comes back, and he's looking for Triple H. They have a tremendous match at No Way Out 2001. Man, go check this match out. It's a history-making match and a tremendous feud. But what happens at that year's WrestleMania? It's The Rock versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold Steve Austin trying to capture the championship back from The Rock. Now, what I didn't bring up, one of the matches that I do want to highlight from 2000 is Triple H and Kurt Angle. They had this thing where, Stephanie McMahon now with Triple H is flirting with Kurt Angle, and he, Triple H walks in on them kissing just like she walked in on him doing something to Trish Stratus, and there is, marital dissension on screen between Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, leading up to The Rock, Kurt Angle, and Stephanie and Triple H at SummerSlam 2000. But The Rock wins the WWF Championship from Triple H. He's now the champion. Stone Cold Steve Austin is gunning for him. They're having their rematch. They're both baby faces. This is kind of like Hulk Hogan and The Rock. But at the same time, this is kind of like Hulk Hogan and The Rock, or kind of like Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 6. Two big baby faces, facing the two biggest baby faces in the company facing off against each other, Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock and The Rock. But what happens at this? Vince McMahon screws The Rock, and Vince McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin are now an alliance. So you would think Triple H, who wrestled The Undertaker earlier in that night, he would then, on Raw, turn on Vince McMahon, and he would turn babyface because his natural enemy is Stone Cold Steve Austin. Remember the lengths he went through to get Stone Cold Steve Austin eliminated, to take Stone Cold Steve Austin out of the game. He actually paid Rikishi to run Stone Cold Steve Austin over with a car. So, but that doesn't happen. Him and Stone Cold Steve Austin, they form a tag team, the two-man power trip. And man, the shit they did, that one incident where they beat up Lita and the Hardy Boys with a chair, they kept hitting Lita repeatedly with that chair, knocking the hell out of Lita with that chair. So they wreak havoc over the WWE, even to the point where they become one of the most dominant tag teams in the early part of 2001. Now, keep in mind, it said 2001. Keep in mind what happens in 2001. Vince McMahon purchases his competition. He purchases WCW. WCW. Matter of fact, today is the anniversary of when he took over WCW on this very day. Right, March the 26th, 2001. He took over WCW. It appeared to simulcast. WWE was where they were, and WCW was in Florida, Panama City. And Vince McMahon comes on TV and says, "I have purchased WCW. I bought WCW." And that's the end of the Monday Night Wars. WWE has won. So Triple H at this time is on top of the world. He's the Intercontinental Champion. He's the Tag Team Champion. Him and Stone Cold, two-man power trip. They're running roughshod over the whole other competition. But they have a match with Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit. And it's during this time that Triple H tears his quad. So this is March. So when they bring the WCW guys in, they only bring in two main eventers, Diamond Dallas Page and Booker T. Anyway, and then they bring in ECW guys that was already there, like Raven, Rob Van Dam, the Dudley Boys, and whatever. But when they bring the WCW guys, Triple H is not there. You know what I'm saying? He has torn his quad. He's in an injury. He's getting surgery. So he is not there for the invasion angle. So what they're forced to do is they're forced to turn Stone Cold Steve Austin heel again. Vince McMahon, he begged Stone Cold Steve Austin. He said, I want the old Stone Cold. You know, stun me, damn it. So they're forced to do other things like put Kurt Angle in that prominent position where Kurt Angle and Stone Cold have that tremendous match at SummerSlam 2001, and Booker T has the match for the WCW Championship with The Rock at SummerSlam 2001. Thomas Jefferson, sucker. So Triple H is not here for that. But then in 2002, Triple H wins the Royal Rumble. Now, late 2001, he comes back, and of course, he's a big heel when he left. But of course, anytime you come out of an injury, and this is something for Big E to think about because Big E just had the neck injury. Whenever you come out of an injury, fans miss you. So, separation makes the heart grow fonder, right? So fans always miss you. They miss seeing you. And even though he was a heel when he left, when he comes back in Madison Square Garden in late 2001, he's a huge baby face. The whole entire garden, comes unglued when he comes back. Comes back with the water spinning it out, the theme song like this. Oh, like he starts the year off great. 2002 is the year of returns. I always call it the year of return. Eddie Guerrero came back. Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall came back. Shawn Michaels came back later that year. But the first person that come back in that yearly cycle was Triple H. He wins the Royal Rumble. And now, like I said, WCW is no more. And during that time, Chris Jericho, to fill that vacuum in, Chris Jericho became a huge star. Chris Jericho became such a huge star that when they wanted to unify the two championships, he ends up defeating Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock in the same night. He defeats The Rock for the WCW Championship and defeats Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWE Championship. So he is going to put, Triple H has won the Royal Rumble. So WrestleMania time rolls around, and he's going to put up the two championships, the WWF Championship and the WCW Championship, big gold belt, up against the returning Triple H. Now, during this time, Stephanie McMahon, during the invasion, she became the owner of WCW while her brother Shane became the owner of, ECW, and her brother Shane became the owner of WCW. So she's really going into her own, and nobody is really thinking of her as Triple H's manager / wife anymore. They're starting to think of her as, her own person. When Triple H comes back and she's still a heel and he's a babyface now, so how's that going to work? She comes up with this whole scheme where she wants Hunter to marry her again. So she says that she's pregnant. But then Triple H finds out later from the doctor that she isn't pregnant, that it was all a lie. So, they're having the wedding. And then Triple H reveals to her, says, you're not pregnant, you're just a manipulative bitch. And then he pedigrees her father and he pedigrees her. She now is in the corner of Chris Jericho, which is crazy because all throughout the invasion angle, it was Chris Jericho that was always dissing her. The theme song for SummerSlam 2001 was Drowning Pool song, Let the Bodies Hit the Floor. And he was like, Stephanie, for you, it's not let the bodies hit the floor. It's let the boobies hit the floor. Funny. So she now is in his corner, in Chris Jericho's corner instead of Triple H. Anyway, Triple H wins the championship at WrestleMania 18. But unfortunately, his return was overshadowed by an even bigger return that happened in February of 2002, and that was the return to the WWF of Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan was gone from the WWF for 9 years, and he was the person that built the WWF. He was the first biggest star of the WWF when they went national. He's way bigger than Triple H. You know, no disrespect, but even at that time, he was a bigger return. So Hulk Hogan versus The Rock is the match that everybody remembers, and Triple H's movement was overshadowed, even though he was the main event. If you ask anybody, that was around at that time, that was watching at that time, the real main event, the main event you saw on top of buses, on top of billboards, that was really advertised, what really sold the pay-per-view, was Hulk Hogan versus The Rock, two big mainstream stars that even non-wrestling fans would know. And Triple H just wasn't that big. He was big for the moment, but there was even bigger returns to come. And he found out just how small of a superstar he was in comparison to Hulk Hogan the next month when Hulk Hogan defeats him for the Undisputed Championship at Backlash. Hulk Hogan he's a babyface. The NWO turned on him because during that Toronto show, man, The Rock was supposed to be the babyface and Hulk Hogan the heel. But fans just love to see, especially WWF fans, because they grew up as little kids watching Hulk Hogan. He was finally back in the WWF. A lot of these cities, like Toronto, like Philadelphia, like Boston, like New York, these cities were not cities that WCW toured. So fans, other than television, fans for 9 years, they did not see Hulk Hogan. They missed to see Hulk Hogan. So just like how they had missed to see Triple H for months and months, and when he came back, they finally loved him. It was the same thing with Hulk Hogan, but even better because Hulk Hogan had been gone for so much more longer. Fans in the Northeast were finally getting a chance to see the guy that they grew up with since they was wee little babies. Eating cereal and watching Saturday morning wrestling and watching Hulk Hogan, cup his ear and watching him hulk up. And, you felt like you were a kid again, especially to see Hulk Hogan back in the WWF. So WWF, which then became WWE that same year, they felt like, you know what? Wouldn't it be cool to see Hulk Hogan back in the red and yellow? Back as Hulkamania, back as a good guy. Say your prayers, take your vitamins. Wouldn't it be cool to see him back having the WWE Championship? So, Unforgiven, Backlash 2002, he defeats Triple H and he's now the Undisputed Champion. Hulk Hogan like at 50 years old. And it was a good nostalgia moment, at that time because me personally, I didn't think we'd ever see the Hulkster back in the Fed, back in his home, back in the house that Hulk built. Because he built that company. That was his company. That was his home. New York City, Boston, Philadelphia, cities in the Northeast. That was his home. So despite how big Triple H was at that time, the role Triple H was on, Triple H wasn't as big as Hulk Hogan, and he found that out. So what is he going to do from there? From there, he goes on to turn heel. And he has a feud with Kane that people still remember, and it's infamous because Kane was doing the storyline where they had discovered that this girl had suffered a death because of Kane that she had gone out with, and Triple H and Ric Flair, who was his manager, at that time, they show, Kane having sex. They actually show necrophilia with this dead body, of this girl, Katie Vick. So he has that feud with Kane, and he turns heel. And like I said, him and Ric Flair's his manager at this point. Because he grew up watching Ric Flair, and Ric Flair's now back in the WWF. He came back at the end of Survivor Series in 2001. and he revealed that he was the co-owner of the WWF. He bought Stephanie and Shane's share. Now they're no longer in ECW and the WCW anymore. There's no more alliance. But Triple H, he's now managing Triple H. Now, Triple H, towards the end of 2002, he's heel again, like I said. Who else is back? Shawn Michaels is back, his former DX partner. And there is this storyline where Shawn Michaels is jumped outside of the parking lot. Other than the Katie Vick storyline, this is one of the biggest things he did in 2002. He's jumped, and it leads to a match between these two, an unsanctioned street fight match between these two at SummerSlam 2002. Now, everybody thinks it's going to be a one-time thing. Shawn Michaels going to come back, he's going to just have one little match with Triple H, finally settle the score between these two. Remember, Triple H kicked him out of DX the night after WrestleMania 14. So there's continuity in this storyline. So, but the match is so good that, WWE decides to sign Shawn Michaels to a permanent contract. And Shawn Michaels and Triple H start to have this incredible feud that leads to Shawn Michaels winning the World Heavyweight Championship at the Survivor Series, Madison Square Garden, the first Elimination Chamber match. Now, to backtrack a little bit, how does the World Heavyweight Championship come into play? Well, like I said in the beginning, Hulk Hogan, and now the champion, he gets defeated by The Undertaker. The Undertaker then gets defeated by The Rock. The Rock then gets defeated by Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam 2002. And the fans again, they turn on The Rock for this new guy, Brock Lesnar, just like they did with Hulk Hogan. But there's the brand split now. They've split the company up into two different brands, the blue brand SmackDown and the red brand Raw. Kind of like, street gangs, or kind of like Democrat versus Republican. It's kind of, we're binary beings. There's always that dichotomy in everything in life. There's always two of everything. So just like there was two companies in the 90s, now there's only one company. So they split the one company in two to have their own version of the Monday Night Wars. And the two general managers are Stephanie McMahon and Eric Bischoff, who was the owner of WCW, the president of WCW, not owner, but president of WCW, and godfather of the NWO, mouthpiece of the NWO. He's now in WWF, and it was a shocking moment. It was kind of ruined by him showing up and him saying hello to Booker T, but it was a shocking moment when Vince McMahon says, "It takes a real son of a bitch to be successful in this business." And I got to give it up to Eric Bischoff. And Eric Bischoff comes out, he hugs Vince. So he's back. Eric Bischoff, like his theme song says, "I'm back, better than ever." So he's back. But one of the things he does was he tries to sign Triple H to an exclusive deal for Monday Night Raw. It doesn't work because Triple H says no to it. But Stephanie McMahon does sign Brock Lesnar to an exclusive deal. So now, kayfabe-wise, there's a problem. There's no champion on Raw because Stephanie McMahon has signed Brock Lesnar to an exclusive contract on SmackDown. So Eric Bischoff creates a whole new championship just for Triple H. And he brings back the big gold belt, the WCW, what was the WCW title in the 80s and 90s, which Ric Flair had, which Sting had, which Hulk Hogan as a heel, he had in WCW, the big gold belt, not the original NWA championship, but the one that Jim Crockett had used on his television since the 80s. He brings that back, and the big gold belt is a whole new category. It's a new championship. And Triple H is the first champion of it. And he is signed exclusively to Raw. And Shawn Michaels, the second one. Shawn Michaels defeats him at the first Elimination Chamber, a match It is a combination of an elimination match and a War Games match that Eric Bischoff creates. Inspiration from War Games, which is the famous WCW gimmick match. He creates that. And Survivor Series 2002 is a great pay per view, guys, from Madison Square Garden. If you could check that out, check it out. It is tremendous. Triple H now forms the faction of Evolution. He has this idea that he wants to be like the Four Horsemen. He watched the Four Horsemen as a kid on TV. He wants to now be that version of Ric Flair. He has this idea where he's the present Batista, and the new guy Randy Orton, Bob Orton's son, is the future, and Ric Flair is the past. Evolution, and they have an awesome theme song. Evolution is a mystery, you know, and they just dominate Raw for the latter half of 2003/2004. Now all the WCW contracts are the latter half of 2002 going into 2003. Now all the WCW contracts are all up. You know, Vince didn't want to spend the big bucks to bring in all the WCW guys, that were top WCW guys when he did the invasion. So that was one of the reasons why the invasion flopped. But now in 2003, all the WCW guys, their contracts, their Time Warner contracts that he didn't want to buy out, are all up at this point. So who comes in? Big Papa Pump for the first guy he defeats. Boom, Big Papa Pump is down. Boom, Booker T. Now the Big Papa Pump feud is really funny because him and Triple H, reminiscent of the Ultimate Warrior and Rick Rude at Royal Rumble 1989, they have a pose down. Triple H and Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner have a pose down as well. But it's one of the worst matches ever. Big Papa Pump is so shitty. His push is derailed, man. He does nothing in 2003 in WWE because he's so horrible wrestling Triple H at this point. So, kind of like with Dean Douglas in 95. When he wrestled Scott Hall, he was so horrible that people were like, oh, this guy is just a lot of hype, right? He's a lot of bullshit. They say he was so good in WCW, which he was if you watched him in WCW. But in WWE, he fails. He's no good. The second guy he beats, Booker T. Now, this WrestleMania 19, this one, people still talk about this, man. People are still upset about this because WWE had never had a black champion ever in their history, a world champion. People say The Rock, but The Rock is, half Samoan, half black. And in WWE TV, they always, played up his Samoan heritage. Always talk about his grandfather's connection to the Hawaii family. They never really talk about, except for when they mention his father in the early days, that he was, his earliest career, that he's black. You know what I mean? So they never had a black world champion ever. So Booker T was over. He done a thing with Goldust after the invasion angle. He was really over. People wanted Booker T to become the world heavyweight champion at WrestleMania 19, and they played into a lot of his past. You know how Booker T had trouble with the law. And Triple H has this one interview where he says people like Booker T with nappy hair and all that. They're not world championship material, playing into a lot of racial stuff. Obviously, Triple H had seen some of Ric Flair's promos, some of Lex Luger's promos when he took on Ron Simmons in the early 90s, and some of the Southern promos. Southern promos always used, even going back to the 60s, when Bill Watts tells Bobo Brazil about he should know his station in life. Southern promos, they always use the racial, they always use racial animosity, racism, hidden racism, latent racism to to cut the promos with the heels. You know, you have in the '70s, even in New York, Hulk Hogan when he was a heel, coming out calling again, just like with the Shawn Michaels, Mike Tyson thing, coming out calling Tony Atlas boy, brown boy, and all that. They always used racial, racial hidden racial overtones in promos. That's just how it was. Not that it was good. They wouldn't get away with it today. Yeah, definitely wouldn't get away with any of that today. But the difference was in those instances when they did that, like even when Lex Luger does it, I think it was a 1991 Halloween Havoc or 1992 against Ron Simmons. Yeah, 1992 because oh no, 91. Harley Race is his manager at that time. Even when he does that, and he tells Ron Simmons that he should be his chauffeur, he should be his driver. Even when he does that, the heel never wins. The fans go against that. They repudiate the racism of the white heel saying racist stuff towards the black babyface, and the heel doesn't go over. But in this instance, when the fans really wanted black and white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever fans, whatever ethnicity you were as a fan, you really wanted Booker T to win the World Heavyweight Championship. You really wanted to be the first black WWE champion, ever, undisputed WWE champion ever. Back when the World Heavyweight title was on the main show, was on Raw. And you wanted Booker T to be that guy. Booker T, at the last minute, Triple H pulls some strings and Booker T doesn't win. You know what I mean? So he playing up this racism stuff. He does everything short of calling Booker T the N-word, talks about his nappy hair, talks about his criminal activity, that he was arrested before in the past, really berates him racially, and then the asshole doesn't, he doesn't even put him over in real life. So fans are really pissed. Like, what the hell, man? This is blatant racism on the part of WWE not putting the title on Booker T. Fans were upset about that. But Triple H, reign of terror, he goes on to defeat the night after WrestleMania 19, possibly the biggest star that WCW ever had in the 1990s during the Monday Night Wars. A WCW made star comes in the night after WrestleMania 19, and that is Goldberg. Goldberg comes in, he defeats The Rock, and people think, okay, he's gonna be the guy. He's gonna be the one to end the streak of Triple H, so to speak. They're leading up to their match at SummerSlam in 2003. No, that doesn't happen. Goldberg, too, is defeated in the Elimination Chamber match that Kevin Nash is in, that Shawn Michaels is in, that Randy Orton is in, and that Chris Jericho is in. And even Kevin Nash, even the friend of Triple H, he himself suffers a tremendous loss when he comes back after being injured in that 10-man tag. He comes back at Bad Blood 2003. He has a Hell in a Cell match with Mick Foley as the referee. He even himself is defeated by... Even he was part of the Reign of Terror, and he's part of the clique. He's one of Triple H's friends. So Triple H is just pissing everybody off, and they're like, who the hell is going to be the guy to finally defeat Triple H? Goldberg does eventually win the World Heavyweight Championship, but quickly he is defeated again by Triple H. And it doesn't even count. Triple H still on this reign of terror. But finally, At WrestleMania 20, a former WCW star, the same guy who was in the match when Triple H had injured his quad back in 2001 when he was forced to go on that hiatus, Chris Benoit, a guy who was WCW champion, but then they stripped him of it. He won the WCW title at Sold Out 2000 from Sid, but they stripped him of it. He was put aside. He was demoted because of his lack of promo skills and because of his size. And like Jim Ross says in the commentary, finally, by God, finally, Chris Benoit has become the heavyweight champion of this world. So it was at WrestleMania 20, Chris Benoit in a great triple threat match, the first triple threat match in WrestleMania history. He takes out Shawn Michaels and Triple H, the two members of D-Generation X. He taps out. Triple H taps out to him, and him and Eddie Guerrero share that moment. Him and Eddie Guerrero, two best friends in real life. Two guys who debuted in the WWE, together in the beginning of the year 2000. And now 4 years later, they are sharing this moment in real life, kind of reminiscent in a way of the curtain call, but something that they showed on TV. Two real life friends celebrating a real life victory. Eddie Guerrero is WWE champion and Chris Benoit is World Heavyweight champion. It was really special. Unfortunately, this moment has been, I say it all the time when I bring up this moment, I was there, I remember it. This moment has been ripped away from WWE history because of what Chris Benoit did, 3 years later in 2007, killing his wife and son. Chris Benoit double murder suicide himself. So nobody remembers this, but it was really good on Triple H's part that finally he had done the job. Finally he put somebody over. After this whole reign of terror, beating Booker T, beating Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner, beating Goldberg at SummerSlam, beating all the time Shawn Michaels. Finally, not only Shawn Michaels was notorious for not putting people over, not really in his second run, but his first run, he was notorious for not putting people over. Triple H was on his reign of terror. He was notorious for not putting other guys over all that much. But he puts him over and he wins. Unfortunately, it doesn't last because Triple H's protege, Evolution member Randy Orton, defeats Chris Benoit at SummerSlam. And they're pushing, now they've broken up Evolution. They're pushing Evolution. They're pushing the storyline of Evolution breaking up. Triple H, of course, the leader of Evolution, he feels like nobody else should have the big gold belt, should have the championship belt, but him in Evolution. And they do a storyline that is reminiscent of the storyline that Ric Flair did in 1990 with Sting. Sting had been a part of the Four Horsemen after Future Shock. 1989, Ric Flair becomes a babyface when Terry Funk attacks him after he loses the World Heavyweight Championship against Ricky Steamboat. Terry Funk attacks him, and Terry Funk and Ric Flair have this feud. Terry Funk has his faction, the J-Tex Corp, with the Great Muta and Buzz Sawyer, and Sting and Ole Anderson and Arn Anderson, of course, come to the aid of Ric Flair, and they form a babyface version of the Four Horsemen. But then when Sting gets a number one contender spot for the Great American Bash, Ric Flair then says, wait a minute, you got to give up that number one contender spot, and only I can be the head honcho, the big boss, the leader, the OG of the Four Horsemen. You can't be the champion and be in the Four Horsemen. You got to give it up. Sting says no, and the Four Horsemen beat the shit out of him. And then he goes on to defeat Ric Flair anyway for the World Heavyweight Championship. They did the same thing with the NWO. They had the Battle Royal. The Giant wins it, and the Giant is part of the NWO, and Hulk Hogan is the champion. And Hulk Hogan tells the Giant, listen, you can't wrestle me. I'm the champion. I'm the only guy that could be in charge. You got to give up the number one contendership spot, and you just got to give it up. Well, the Giant doesn't do that, and him and Hulk Hogan go on to have a feud, and he turns babyface, and the NWO turns on him. But this was something similar, but this was a little bit different because Randy Orton had actually taken the shot against Chris Benoit and actually avenged the loss of Triple H at WrestleMania against Chris Benoit. But he's already the champion. So you can't say that he was not like he was number one contender. He was already the champion. But Evolution still turns on him. They do the thumbs down. They put him up on the shoulder, Batista, and then they drop him. And then, Randy Orton's babyface run 2004 was shitty. And Randy Orton really goes nowhere. And eventually Triple H defeats Randy Orton to become the champion again. So again, we're back to square one. Even though Benoit was successful, still, Triple H is still the World Heavyweight Champion at, on their freaking Raw brand, still running, roughshod over the whole competition. So, finally, it leads up to WrestleMania 21, WrestleMania Golden Hollywood. And Batista wins the Royal Rumble. So people are like, well, who's Batista going to face? Is he going to face JBL on SmackDown, or is he going to face Triple H on Raw? Eventually, he chooses, Triple H. He does the whole thumbs up, thumbs down thing. He Batista bombs Triple H to a table. And the match him and Triple H have at WrestleMania 21 is a blood fest. Man, Triple H is bleeding, Batista bleeding, they're bleeding buckets. Man, Triple H has proven how great of a worker he really is. And Batista becomes the World Heavyweight Champion. They're launching a rocket to Batista. They're about to switch brands with him. He's on Raw at this point. He's about to be the face of SmackDown, which was on network television at this point. You know what I mean? So he's about to be I was thinking at that time that he was about to be the man. He was about to be the new babyface that they had found. Unfortunately, the guy who wins the WWE Championship that same night from JBL is the guy that they're going to really run with. He's doing the rapper gimmick. He's taking inspiration from Eminem, who was the biggest musical star at this point in 2004 or 5, I should say, 2005. And it's John Cena. He's on fire with the "You Can't See Me, You Can't See Me," and they're about to switch him to Raw to make a feud with Eric Bischoff, who's still the GM of Raw at this point. But the point being, Triple H puts Batista over. Now, the next year, John Cena becomes so big that him and Triple H have a babyface match. 2006, they have a babyface match against one another. And Triple H is the first one to ever say that, John Cena can't wrestle. And that's when the Cena haters come to fruition. That's when it really starts with all the Cena hate that would basically define John Cena's babyface. Well, it was a pretty good match, WrestleMania 22. Kind of uneventful. It doesn't really steal the show, not compared to Shawn Michaels versus Vince McMahon. That was the era that Shawn Michaels became Mr. WrestleMania. He whoever he was wrestling that night would overpower whoever was wrestling in the main event, Triple H included. But in the storyline that he's having with Vince McMahon is playing up a lot of his Christian, his Christian beliefs, mocking him for his Christian belief. They're talking about how they were involved with the Montreal screw job to screw Bret Hart, because Bret Hart that year, 2006, he goes into the Hall of Fame, and his book comes out, and he kind of, makes peace with the WWE. Not really. He would be back a couple of years later in 2010, but he makes peace with the WWE, finally, making amends with them, and he becomes part of the street fight storyline between HBK and Vince. And Vince challenges Shawn Michaels at the next pay-per-view to a match, a tag team match, where him and his son Shane will take on Shawn Michaels and God. Now, of course, this this amounts to a this amounts to a handicap match, because God, the Lord of the universe, Yahweh Sabaoth in Hebrew, is not going to come out for a wrestling match against Vince McMahon. So anyway, mocking Shawn Michaels' religious beliefs. And Shawn Michaels needs a partner because Vince and Shane are teaming up. So who does he get for his partner after Triple H is defeated by John Cena? Triple H becomes a babyface, and who does Shawn Michaels get for his partner? He gets Triple H. And Triple H and Shawn Michaels in 2006, they reformed DX. They reformed the original DX. Now, the 2000s, for the first time, the 2006 version was a lot more tame, because Shawn Michaels is a Christian now. He can't do a lot of suck it. He can't do a lot of obscenities, but he does kind of funny stuff. They do an imitation of Vince McMahon and Shane. They pour shit on Vince McMahon and Shane. you know, you know, they do some kind of funny stuff, but it's not like it was, man. So they're supposed to have a WrestleMania 23, the WrestleMania where Trump shows up and he's in Lashley's corner against Umaga, right? And Batista against Undertaker. Undertaker wins the Royal Rumble, um, 2007. They're supposed to have a rematch with Triple H versus John Cena from last year, but they don't. Triple H, gets injured again. DX is derailed. And as a matter of fact, the last match that DX had in 2006 on their first original run back was against it was Edge and Randy Orton versus Shawn Michaels and Triple H. Eric Bischoff, who had his book coming out at that time, Controversy Creates Cash. He comes back as a special referee. And it is Eric Bischoff, ironically, poetically, that does the count on one of the last DX matches. The Godfather of the NWO doing the count on the last match DX has in 2006. So anyway, they can't do in 2007 the rematch with John Cena versus Triple H anymore, because Triple H is out with an injury. So they do Shawn Michaels. And the Shawn Michaels versus John Cena match at WrestleMania 23 was pretty good. I mean, long story short, Triple H does come back, and he does go on to the next year's WrestleMania 24, to have a triple threat match himself, Randy Orton, and John Cena, in which people think, oh, well, either he's going to win or John Cena's going to win. John Cena comes back at the Royal Rumble 2008, Madison Square Garden. The crowd goes crazy. And then they remember, wait a minute, John Cena, we hate John Cena. Then they start booing. Well, he's one of the three, but Randy Orton goes on to win, and he chases Randy Orton until he finally gets switched to SmackDown, and then him and Edge have a feud. And he beats Edge for the championship. And throughout 2008, he's a babyface. He's still on top, really. SummerSlam 2008, he faces the Great Khali. But Triple H is starting at this point to really take a step back from professional wrestling, up until, he wouldn't really do a lot, because he started to have his kids, him and Stephanie McMahon. They got married in real life. That was one of the things that, aren't imitating life. He was Stephanie McMahon's on-screen husband, and then he became her husband in real life. He actually dumped China, who he was engaged with. China finds out, the truth, and then, Stephanie McMahon goes up to her in the bathroom stall, and she says, "Well, I'm sorry, Joni. I just started doing a lot with Hunter, and I fell in love with him. And China feels burned by this. What I mean? China feels so burned by this that she gets heavily involved with drugs. She becomes an alcoholic. She has a really rough life that resulted in her death, and we talk about it on this channel in 2016. You know, she becomes one of those wrestling casualties, and for years she blamed Triple H. And in one of the last interviews that she did with Vince Russo, who was her friend, she calls Triple H Diddy. She calls him Puffy. Obviously alluding to that he's bad luck. He's bad juju. He's kind of like P Diddy. What we say that P Diddy is bad luck. P Diddy is bad juju, and a lot of people that associated with P Diddy, like Mace, his small protege, that is is now dissing him. You know, she compares him to P Diddy. So she kind of attributed her downfall, to him, just like, say, somebody like Jake Roberts attributed his downfall to the Honky Tonk Man, or somebody like Mace. People do this a lot. People blame their, their bad mistakes, their bad choices in life on other people, and she blamed her bad choice, the turns her life took, on Triple H up until, she unfortunately passed away. But Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, they start to have children. He marries the boss's daughter. So once again, Triple H, knowing who to become friends with, who to become cool with, right? Becomes cool with and friends with and family to the boss of all bosses, Vince McMahon. He becomes Vince McMahon's son-in-law. But during this time, 2008, 2009-ish, he's only really wrestling at WrestleMania and a couple of big match shows, because he is now focusing on being, behind the scenes guy, focusing on being a family man and focusing on being behind the scenes. He does wrestle Randy Orton at the 20th anniversary, the 25th anniversary of WrestleMania. And the storyline with him and Randy Orton, where he breaks into Randy Orton's home, man, that is crazy. And it was during that storyline that we finally learned that Triple H and Stephanie are still together, unlike the storyline in 2002 where they got a divorce and she lied about being pregnant. That was just kayfabe. That was just television. They finally are really together. It was revealed that. And Randy Orton slid. Who can forget that Raw where Triple H is handcuffed to the rope and Randy Orton slithers over to Stephanie and she's unconscious and he kisses her? Man, that was such disrespect. But, they have a pretty good match at WrestleMania 25. But it's overshadowed by The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, which is one of the best matches ever. From there, WrestleMania 26, he starts to discover new talent. And one of the guys he starts to discover is this Irish youngster, the Celtic warrior, Sheamus. Now, Sheamus has a unique look. He is very white. Like, not just that he's white, his race. He is pale. He's very pale. He almost looks albino-ish, right? So he has this unique look. Nobody looks like him. So Triple H is his workout buddy. He puts him on. He discovers him. And much like Batista, through his association with Triple H, he becomes a huge star. And Triple H gets on his first big match at WrestleMania 26. Okay, now The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels have their rematch from WrestleMania 25. The match is so great; it gets critical reviews. People to this day still say that it is one of the best matches ever. So how can you top that if you're in Shawn Michaels' mind? You're like, damn, well, what am I going to do next? I'm going to put my career on the line. So Streak versus Career, WrestleMania 26, Phoenix, Arizona. Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker. And of course, tops what Triple H and Sheamus are talking about and doing. But that leads to Triple H saying Shawn Michaels retired. What a moment Shawn Michaels has where he talks about, on Raw when he retires again. He talks about his faith. He talks about his friendship with Triple H. Triple H comes out and hugs him. He says, this is where we started and this is where we're going to end it. Shawn Michaels has left the building. Of course, that's what they used to say when he first became a heel. And he was channeling Elvis. He was a huge Elvis fan. So when Elvis used to leave the building, they would say Elvis has left the building. So Shawn Michaels started to do that as well. So in his retirement speech, he says that again. Shawn Michaels has left the building. And then Triple H comes out. He hugs them. Two best friends, just like Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. Two best friends. They travel down the road together. They spend more time with each other than they probably did with their own family members just because they travel down the road together. They work so closely together, both in tag team and against each other. So it's an incredible moment when Michaels retired in 2010. Ironically enough, that's when Bret Hart came back. He had that street fight with Vince McMahon. Bret Hart finally making real amends with WWE, coming back for WrestleMania 26. But with Triple H, now storyline wise, he has to avenge the loss of Shawn Michaels, his friend. So WrestleMania 27, The Rock is finally coming back after all these years, right? People thought they would never see The Rock back. He's finally coming back. He's the guest host of WrestleMania, and his storyline was with The Miz and John Cena. But Triple H also has a storyline. Now, WrestleMania 27, it was supposed to be Sting coming in to wrestle The Undertaker. Sting has never been in the WWF. There was rumors that he was finally going to leave TNA and he was going to come into the WWE and wrestle The Undertaker. That doesn't happen. It's Triple H as a surprise return. Triple H, and now they're pretending Triple H and Undertaker never had a match together, even though they had a match together at what many consider to be the best WrestleMania of all time, WrestleMania 17. Now 10 years later, they're pretending they never had a match together. Whatever. They have their match. It's pretty good. Of course, The Undertaker wins. Probably the best match on the show because everything else in this WrestleMania sucked. I remember this is 2011, first WrestleMania in Atlanta, Georgia, which is historic because WWE is doing a WrestleMania in WCW's territory, WCW's home base. That'd be like WCW doing a Starrcade in New York. I remember not being able to order this show and being upset, and I had to read spoilers online and from friends on Facebook. But then I ordered it the next night, the replay, and turns out it's one of the shittiest WrestleManias ever. And I'm glad, I pirated it and didn't have to pay money for it. I remember being upset. I'm like, oh, well, what's The Rock going to do? How's he going to get involved as a guest host? How's he going to get involved in Cena versus The Miz? He does basically nothing. And the real event is the following year at WrestleMania 28 in Miami with him and John Cena finally going to square off. So what's Triple H doing at WrestleMania 28? Well, Triple H is having an end of an era match, a Hell in a Cell match with The Undertaker, a rematch, but this time with Shawn Michaels as a special guest referee. Now, Shawn Michaels and Triple H have history. Shawn Michaels and Undertaker have history. If you remember, Undertaker was in the match that DX was first formed. Undertaker just wrestled Triple H at WrestleMania the year before and just retired. Shawn Michaels had for Shawn Michaels, two back-to-back WrestleManias and retired Shawn Michaels 2 years before that. This is 2012. End of an era match, Hell in a Cell, Shawn Michaels, super kicks. Undertaker still, after a lot of tombstones, Undertaker still wins, and he redeems himself in the Hell in a Cell main events because he didn't have a good track record at Hell in a Cell. WrestleMania 15 was when he lynched the Big Boss Man. Again, just like with the blackface thing, with the Nation of Domination, or just like with the Booker T thing, playing on racism, lynching somebody is probably not something you want to do because it recalls a time in American history when people were lynched for real. You know what I mean? Racial attacks. Granted, it was the Big Boss Man, a white guy. Thank God it wasn't a black guy. He would have been even worse. You know, um, you know, lynching somebody, that's not something you want to do. But that's what they did at WrestleMania 15. So now here, fast forward to WrestleMania 28. Undertaker redeemed himself. He finally had a good Hell in a Cell match, something you can remember, not something you'd be embarrassed to talk about at WrestleMania 28. They're calling it the end of an era match. I don't know why, because neither Triple H nor Undertaker retired. Well, they all shake each other's hand. They all have history with one another, I guess. That was the reason behind it. Now, who's another guy that Triple H has history with? Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar, the night after WrestleMania 28, he returns. He comes back. He was in the UFC. He won the UFC Championship in 2009 from Randy Couture. He successfully defended the UFC Championship at UFC 100 against Shane Carwin. And he had a pretty good run in UFC, except for the time when he was Cain Velasquez beat the shit out of him. Free Cain Velasquez. By the way, Cain Velasquez is locked up on some bullshit. He was just defending his family's honor. He should be free. Free Cain Velasquez. Hashtag free Cain. He was, the guy he shot freaking molested his family member. Anybody would have did that. Fucking going after a chomo. Fuck that chomo. Cain Velasquez was justified. But anyway, Brock Lesnar is defeated roundly by Cain Velasquez, again defeated by Alistair Overeem. He sees the Undertaker in the event at in UFC in 2011, and he Undertaker says, "Let's do it," and alluding to their history, of course, in the WWE. But anyway, Brock Lesnar is defeated. He suffers diverticulitis. He never returns back to the UFC. He instead goes back to the WWE in 2012, night after WrestleMania 28. And him and Triple H have their match at SummerSlam 2012, where he breaks Triple H's arm. He's just a beast. People in WWE worship him in his second run because he was a legitimate champion, because he was UFC champion. Of course, if Cain Velasquez had lasted in the WWE, he had a win over Brock Lesnar. I can't see Alistair Overeem doing that because Alistair Overeem doesn't like wrestling. But anyway, I know I go off on sidebars, guys. Forgive me, but that's just how I am. Free thought, stream of consciousness shit. I always do that. That's my style. So Brock Lesnar breaks Triple H's arm. SummerSlam 2012. They have their rematch in New York at WrestleMania 29. It's a pretty good match, and Brock Lesnar is redeemed. Last time he was in WWE, he was booed out of the building. Him and Goldberg, Stone Cold Steve Austin, stunned. Stunned both of them and kicked both of their asses out of the WWE. Brock Lesnar going to the NFL, and Goldberg just retiring, never to come back again until WrestleMania 32, right? In 2016. So Triple H, from like I said, this point on, this is 2013. He's not really doing anything until the WrestleManias. The next year, WrestleMania, he wants to wrestle CM Punk. CM Punk's not having it. He's tired. He had the best match on the show, him and the Undertaker. They did a tribute match to Paul Bearer. Paul Bearer just passed away at that time. And, they did the tribute match, and they had the best match on the show. I remember being there that night. And the main event was The Rock versus John Cena for the WWE Championship. The Rock is WWE Champion, and John Cena is the challenger. He won the Royal Rumble. And nobody was into The Rock versus John Cena the second time. It was like you said last year, it was once in a lifetime. Here they're doing it again. And this is New York City. And fans were just dead by the time Undertaker and CM Punk came around. So, Triple H saw that and he wants to wrestle, CM Punk at WrestleMania 30. And, because you see the power that CM Punk has. And the first WrestleMania they're going to do on the WWE Network, their new streaming service, they want to really make a good impression. But CM Punk says, fuck that. He walks out of WWE. He leaves WWE for real, not like he was doing in 2011. And Vince McMahon says, well, y'all in the main event. You're wrestling Triple H. And then CM Punk says, well, he has to wrestle me. I don't have to wrestle him. So CM Punk leaves the company for real. And 2014, they come up with this thing where now Triple H is heel again. He turned heel at SummerSlam 2013, where he screwed Daniel Bryan out of the WWE Championship, and he's formed the Authority with himself and Stephanie McMahon. They're saying that Daniel Bryan is a B-plus player. They're holding Daniel Bryan down, and then because of that, Daniel Bryan now creates the Yes Movement. The Superstars in 2013 walked out on Triple H. They staged a massive walkout, because this was the time politically, 2012, 2013, where they were doing the Occupy Wall Street movement. People like Bernie Sanders had started to gain some traction, and people were against the multinational corporations. So they were parroting that on WWE TV by having them be against Triple H, the COO of the company, walking out against them and anything. Really parroting a lot of real life shit, because wrestling, as we know, famously doesn't have a union and should have one. So they do a Occupy WWE movement, and Daniel Bryan becomes like the Bernie Sanders of it. But Daniel Bryan becomes the guy that people want to see. So, but Batista has gone on to Hollywood, and Batista is now back, and Batista wins the Royal Rumble in 2014. So Batista's the guy they're pushing again, but the fans don't want Batista. They want Daniel Bryan. So they're pushing Batista versus Randy Orton at WrestleMania 30, but fans don't really want that. So they come up with the storyline where Triple H will be one of the guys that Daniel Bryan has to face. And if he can beat Daniel Bryan earlier, and if Daniel Bryan can beat him earlier that night, because CM Punk's not there, he faces Daniel Bryan. If Daniel Bryan can beat him, then Daniel Bryan will go on to a triple threat match with Batista and Randy Orton, and he will then beat them. They've unified the World Heavyweight Championship and WWE Championship again, just like they did in 2001. And now, so Daniel Bryan wrestles twice. He wrestles Triple H and he wrestles Randy Orton and Batista that night, and it's one of Daniel Bryan's finest moments. He defeats Triple H that night. It is the Yes movement. It doesn't last because Daniel gets injured, and plus having wrestling Kane after his first title defense, and he's wrestling freaking Kane. So Triple H at this time is backstage. He creates the concept of NXT because they need a developmental brand. WWE originally had drawn a lot of territories. There were many territories around the country, you know, and the guys would develop their skills, hone their craft on these territories, but there were no more territories anymore. There was no more WCW anymore. They tried with ECW on the Sci-Fi Channel starting in 2006, but that was a failure. It kind of lasted a little while, but then they had this new concept of NXT, which would be a developmental brand and be an hour show and draws heavily on the studio wrestling that Triple H himself, as an NWA WCW mark, grew up loving and liking. So he becomes influential in changing the face of women's wrestling and changing the face of indie wrestling to the point where he even puts the hottest indie company in the 2000s out of business, ROH, you know, by getting all their talent, by getting the Seth Rollinses, by getting the John Moxley's, aka the Dean Ambroses, and NXT becomes the new hottest thing in pro wrestling, you know, on first on the USA Network, then on the WWE Network by 2016. And Triple H is responsible. And that's when Triple H, you know, takes on that role of like when a new star would come in, like Nakamura or somebody that the indie fans were really happy when he would take the picture and he would be pointing to this guy or girl, you know. I mean, he's responsible for NXT being the success that NXT was. He wanted to take the company in a new direction. Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, all the people that we're seeing now at WrestleMania 38 that are going to, in a couple of weeks, wrestle is because of Triple H. You know, it's because of the direction that he decided to take the company in. Anyway, he breaks up the Shield, him and Seth Rollins. They were supposed to have their match, but then at WrestleMania 32, Seth Rollins gets injured. A couple of years later, he does have the match with Seth Rollins, where he comes on a motorcycle with Stephanie McMahon. But again, after WrestleMania 30, his role is more of a creative role. Role is more of a COO of the company. He is now, when Vince McMahon steps down, he or dies, he's going to take over the WWE because Shane is out of the company. Shane doesn't, even when Shane came back in 2016, Shane wasn't, you know, it's not the heir apparent. The heir apparent is Triple H. The heir apparent is Triple H is the hottest. So he goes from being this Connecticut blue blood jobber, basically, with one of the lamest gimmicks ever, to hooking up with the Clique, then to hooking up with Stephanie, you know, hooking up with one of the greatest factions ever in wrestling, then hooking up with revolutionizing wrestling in that way, and even revolutionizing free speech in this country. Because I would argue before the 1990s, there was a lot of censorship in wrestling and a lot of censorship on TV. And as we said in the 90s review video, the 90s pushed the envelope. The 90s pushed the envelope with rock music. Like Triple H introduced a lot of people to Motorhead with his entrance theme. Time to play the game, right? You know, incorporating a lot of pop culture, pushing the envelope, pushing the edge with DX, and then revolutionizing professional wrestling again by introducing us to Randy Orton and Batista. Then by revolutionizing it again multiple times, being part of such big storylines and introducing us to a lot of the hottest indie wrestlers that are the biggest stars right now in the company, you know, revolutionizing women's wrestling, being the guy that really pushed for the women's division, being the guy that really pushed to change the trajectory of women's wrestling, himself and Stephanie. So he deserves a lot of props for that. WrestleMania 31, just a quick aside. WrestleMania 31, Sting finally comes to the WWE. They finally have their match. Sting comes to the WWE at Survivor Series 2014. debuting, costing Triple H's team the match, putting Dolph Ziggler over. But when they have their match at WrestleMania at 31, 2015, man, DX comes out, the NWO comes out, the NWO's there to back Sting up, DX is there to back. So we finally seen the NWO versus DX, these two factions that revolutionized professional wrestling and revolutionized television in the 90s were the faces of the Monday Night Wars. They're finally facing off against each other. They're old as hell. Rest in peace, Scott Hall. You know what I mean? But all the members of the clique finally in the same ring together again. It was a cool moment to watch, but I didn't like the ending. Sting lost. His first WrestleMania match. The guy's never been in the WWE. He was the face of WCW for years and years, even before, Monday Nitro. He should have had a win at least. He goes on to have the match with Seth Rollins at Night of Champions 2015 and gets the buckle bomb and, never wrestles again in the WWE. Thank God he's back in AEW right now. You know what I mean? But Triple H screwed him over. So Triple H, once again, defeats a WCW wrestler. You're not better than God. So, and then WrestleMania 32, he has the match with Roman Reigns. 33, he has the match with Seth Rollins. 34, he introduces us to Ronda Rousey. Now, at WrestleMania, they say this is why he beat Sting. Because at WrestleMania 31, they have this confrontation where he comes out, him and Stephanie McMahon as the authority to thank the fans, or whatever, and to gloat that he's finally beaten the last of the last WCW stars, Sting, the franchise of WCW. And who's in the audience? Ronda Rousey, who at that time in 2015, she was on her undefeated streak just before she met Holly Holm or Amanda Nunes. She was on her undefeated streak. She was the biggest star in MMA. She was the Hulk Hogan of the UFC. She was the face of the UFC at that time. So The Rock comes out, he interrupts Triple H, and he brings out Ronda Rousey. And The Rock and Ronda Rousey have this confrontation with Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. Now, people are thinking, okay, the following year at WrestleMania 32, they're going to do Levi's Stadium, AT&T Stadium. They're going to do a record attendance, a record-breaking attendance, and they're going to make history. And then Ronda Rousey's going to wrestle. And in wrestling, she's already influenced by wrestling. She uses Roddy Piper's name. Roddy Piper passed away that year in 2015. She dedicates one of her fights, I think, with Yusha Tate, I believe it was, to Roddy Piper. So people are thinking, okay, they're going to have Ronda Rousey and The Rock versus Triple H and Stephanie at WrestleMania 32. No, they don't. They end up having Roman Reigns, who they did a replay of WrestleMania 30 where they tried to stack the deck against Daniel Bryan. Now the Authority is trying to stack the deck against Roman Reigns, where they make the stipulation at that year's Royal Rumble that Roman Reigns, the champion, has to defend the title against the participants of the Royal Rumble, and whoever wins the Royal Rumble will now win the WWE Championship. So Triple H wins the WWE Championship, and he goes on to WrestleMania 32 to face Roman Reigns. Now, okay, it's a shitty match. It kind of gets Roman Reigns over. He spears Stephanie McMahon. Roman Reigns is nowhere near the biggest star, as big a star as he is, like, say, today. Nowadays, he's still getting booed out of buildings, and the win against Triple H does nothing for him. They should have to. Now, they don't bring Ronda Rousey in until she finally says she's done with the UFC, and she was completely embarrassed in her second loss to Amanda Nunes, right? So they bring Ronda Rousey in, at WrestleMania, um, WrestleMania 34 in New Orleans. Right, they're returning to New Orleans. WrestleMania 34. It's her debut match. Her debut match, she blows it away, and it's really because of Triple H. Triple H not only revolutionized wrestling with the introduction in NXT, but he also revolutionized by bringing in Ronda Rousey and really putting over Ronda Rousey in that match. It's him that's taking all the bumps for Ronda Rousey. Of course, not Stephanie McMahon. She's not a wrestler. She wrestled a couple of times, but she's never really been any good, really, at taking bumps. But it's Triple H that is the one that, put Ronda Rousey over and allows Ronda Rousey to become the star that Ronda Rousey eventually became in wrestling. She'll be headlining WrestleMania 38 in a couple weeks against Charlotte Flair. So, he did that. And then, of course, like I said, he wrestled Seth Rollins, in these last few WrestleManias. But these past few years, since like WrestleMania 36, right? He's really, chilled out. He hasn't done really much. And then last year he suffered his heart attack. And we were all praying for the game. But thank you, the game. Thank you, Triple H, for revolutionizing professional wrestling, having some of the coolest entrances. Shit, 2015. Say what you want about the movie and say what you even want about the match itself against Sting. But when he comes out and he's dressed as the Terminator, or at WrestleMania 22 when he was dressed as Conan the Barbarian. 2015, that was the year Arnold Schwarzenegger went into the Hall of Fame. Man, you can say what you want about the man, but Triple H is that dude, man. He's definitely a top 10. He is kind of like the Jay-Z of wrestling. I compare him a lot to Jay-Z because at one time, Triple H was in Shawn Michaels' shadow in the way that Jay-Z was kind of in Biggie's shadow, but Jay-Z married Beyonce and he took him to another level. Triple H married Stephanie McMahon and took him to another level. Who would have thought that the Connecticut Blue Blood that debuted in 1995 against Bob Holly at that year's SummerSlam would now be the, be the heir apparent to the WWE, be the guy that's going to take over the WWE eventually. And unfortunately, like all of us, but Triple H, most of all, members of the clique, they suffered a tremendous loss with Scott Hall passing away, a couple of weeks ago. And now this. It's been a really hard year for the clique. Prayers up for them, throwing it up for them. I bid you adieu, again, Triple H. He is that damn good. Peace. Don't forget to like, subscribe, put your comments in about the career of Triple H. I didn't get everything that Triple H ever did. I really didn't talk about that injury to that guy, Mike Bell in '96. That unfortunately that was one of the worst injuries that we've ever seen in professional wrestling. It was a botched pedigree. Things go wrong sometimes. What can you do? It's wrestling. It's not ballet. But overall, I think Triple H's contributions have been positive in professional wrestling. Yeah, him and the clique were kind of trolls and assholes doing what they did to Mark Henry. Some of the stuff is culturally insensitive with the DX stuff, some of the parodies. When they did it again in 99, with the corporation, they did it a lot better, no blackface stuff. People blame for the China thing, but I feel like that's unfair. You can't really blame for that. But overall, he revolutionized professional wrestling. He was a real star, and he stuck out in the world of professional wrestling. Of course, being a clique member. Anyway, love you guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell button to see when my next video is coming out. Love y'all.